Hi, everybody. As Mariel said, I'm Rebecca Parlakian. I'm the Senior Director of Programs at 0 to 3, and I'm so honored to lead our parenting and grandparenting pillar of work. Excited to talk with you about limit setting today, but first, a commercial. If you've never heard of 0 to 3 before, we are a national nonprofit focused on the healthy development of babies and toddlers, and we provide support and resources for parents, professionals, and policymakers. So if you've never been to our website, please check it out for parenting resources as well as advocacy materials. Let's jump in. I wanted to start off by just talking a little bit about the demographics of millennial parents, since that is probably the majority of parents that you're seeing right now. I want to give a shout out to Gen Z, who's coming up quickly behind. Since that's a fairly small percentage of births, I'm going to emphasize or really sort of spotlight millennials. There's a lot of variation in sort of when the years start and end, but generally, as a rule of thumb, we say the millennial generation is 1980 to 2000. They're for their birth dates. And at this point, about 55% of millennial women have given birth. Following a national trend over time, women are increasingly older at the age of their child's first birth. So now it's about age 26 for the first birth. And we know that this generation is incredibly diverse and multicultural. A little bit less than half the millennial generation is non-white. And so really bringing tremendous diversity with them into the well child visit. They're more likely to be unmarried as a whole, with 33% of millennials reporting being single. And when it comes to technology, what's interesting about this generation is that rather than calling, Grandma Ginny, they're typing up or reaching out to Grandma Google. And so, almost 100%, somewhere between 94 and 99% of millennial parents own a smartphone, and it is one of their primary tools in accessing parenting information at this point. At the same time, a really interesting survey found that 85% of millennial parents reported that they found social media creates unrealistic parenting expectations. And 45% of millennials say social media influencers make them feel bad, quote unquote. And I think what's really important for this in terms of what providers should know is that, first of all, where parents are going for parenting information. But secondly, it's really an opportunity to talk about influencers. You might want to sort of suss out who the parenting influencers are and who you feel comfortable recommending, because it's important to remember a lot of parenting influencers are producing programming, whether it's 60, 90 seconds, 2 minutes long, but it is curated programming. So when you see a parent serving, fruit cut into like hexagons to their child, and their child, happily eating it, that's a program, and it may or may not be reality. What is reality is, your child's t-shirt is covered in cheese sauce and they're laying on the floor of the supermarket screaming because they want cookies. And if that's your reality, you're going to feel bad when you see a social media influencer living a very different life. But in reality, it's a curated life. And I just think that's an important context that millennial parents are raising their children in, and that I think we need to spotlight and be aware of as professionals. Surveys of millennial parents in terms of their beliefs about parenting really show this emphasis and value placed on individuality, lifting up and celebrating what makes their child unique, this emphasis on child self-esteem. And I think there's probably a lot of reasons for that. One of them being that I think a lot of millennials felt like they didn't experience this in their own families of origin. And so they really have this desire to offer their child this sort of unlimited, unconditional love and acceptance that they may or may not have received as children themselves. Interestingly, another survey found that 3 in 4 parents surveyed reported using a gentle parenting approach. Now, I'm assuming I just did a similar presentation for childcare providers recently when I asked them, have you ever heard of gentle parenting? Raise your hand. Do you never want to hear about gentle parenting? Please raise your hand. And pretty much everybody raised their hand to both questions. So what is gentle parenting? I think it was originally developed as a concept that came from a very good place, which was how do we support children and set limits in ways that are loving, responsive, and supportive? And again, perhaps really coming from a place that the millennials felt that they didn't experience. A lot of millennials, you know, grew up in a situation where it was like, oh, you want to cry? I'll give you something to cry about, or you get what you get and you don't get upset. There wasn't, for a lot of us, there wasn't this huge emphasis on like why our feelings were important in our families of origin. So gentle parenting in a way is a reaction to that by saying, how can we be the opposite of harsh? How can we be gentle and yet still support and nurture our child's learning and development? The drawback of that potentially is that it's been sort of interpreted by a lot of different parenting influencers to mean a lot of different things that aren't helpful to parents. Some of them meaning, I can't ever say no to my child, or it will harm their development or self-esteem. The distress my child experiences as a result of limit setting is traumatic for them. I have to be okay with all kinds of negative behavior because I can't set limits because limits are not gentle. These are all really important misconceptions about gentle parenting that we are going to hopefully take apart in our discussion today. Not surprisingly, when you're in a situation where you're interpreting gentle parenting as you're never able to set limits, a lot of parents feel like their child is running the show. And not surprisingly, almost half of millennial parents tell us that they feel burned out. The other two trends that emerged from our survey data was that a lot of millennial parents, the majority in fact, really underestimated the importance of the first year as a profoundly shaping experience for infants. And by this, there were things like the quality of care. Parents didn't really understand that quality of care really matters even for young infants, or exposure to arguments or family stress can really influence infants even very young. Parents also, and this is what we're going to emphasize more today, parents also reported what we called an expectations gap, which is that they reported expecting more from their toddlers than we know from brain development that toddlers are able to give us. So for example, you can imagine where this comes from. You have that 2.5-year-old who's like, sassy and telling you what to do and telling you the rules. And, we love our sassy 2+ year olds. But their brains, in terms of self-control and self-regulation and decision-making, are still fairly immature. And so while they may be verbal and sassy and imitating the gestures they've seen in the adults around them, that doesn't mean they have the self-control and self-regulation that goes along with that maturity. This is also a really important opportunity to give parents new glasses to look at challenging behavior. Because if we as parents look at a challenging behavior and say, yeah, like her frontal lobe is not wired yet, and so that's why I'm seeing this behavior, we're likely to respond with a little bit more patience and compassion than if we look at a behavior and say to ourselves, she could do better, and she's choosing to do this because she wants to get me. It's a strategy to get her way, or she's naughty. So if I'm thinking in that frame, I'm probably going to respond with more harshness and a more punitive way. So really helping parents understand what their young toddlers are capable of gives them new glasses to interpret behavior in ways that support healthy development and a healthy parent-child relationship. We also ask parents, what could you do a better job of? And as you can see from the screen, it's all about their own self-regulation. And what I want you to take away from this slide is that our self-regulatory uh, mindset, where we are in our regulatory capacity, is catching. Our child catches our calm. Our child catches our distress and upset. So when we are spiraling up with our toddler, it does not help them calm. They catch it and they spiral up with us. And that's not where we want to go. So really supporting parents' capacity to reframe behavior and calm themselves in the moment is the best prevention strategy you can offer families when it comes to age-appropriate limit setting. So I'm going to offer a lot of scripting today because I really feel like, first of all, you have to find scripting that feels natural coming out of your mouth, number one. Number two, you're going to be meeting families from every walk of life with all different sets of values and beliefs that they're bringing and cultures that they're bringing into the well child visit. And so I just want to give you lots of examples. But when it comes to limit setting, these are kind of the top 5 messages. One is that nothing works all the time. So, and that is true from toddler through teens. So you have a 3-year-old who today responds really well to distraction, but tomorrow, because they woke up in the middle of the night with a nightmare and they didn't sleep well, and then at childcare they had a substitute and they didn't have their favorite dinner that night at dinner time, so they didn't eat very much, and then they completely lose it at bath time and are not responsive to distraction. So nothing works all the time. What parents are dealing with in every moment and in their relationship with their child is not just the child, but the context around the child. And so that's really important to remember. You're not doing it wrong. It's just there's no magic, dust that you can sprinkle on a child to help them work through a difficult moment. We can only control our own actions, and we'll be talking a little bit about that. Secondly, different strategies work at different ages and stages and with different children. So think about temperament. Some strategies, I had one child who had a really high persistence temperament, easygoing kid. I had one kid who was big reactor and low frustration tolerance. And I will say he is about to turn 20, and he called me from the airport on Thursday night, literally crying hysterically because his flight was canceled and then he left his carry-on in the airplane without a bag tag. Anyway, but he still needs a lot of regulatory support because of his temperament. Whereas, my other child, that would not have fazed her. So I often tell parents, you've just started the hardest job in the world, because guess what? Your job responsibilities and job tasks change every 6 months. So the limit setting strategy that worked with a 12-month-old who's just started crawling no longer work with an 18-year-old who's running. So you really have to be very flexible, and as a parent, expect to be making regular changes, attunements, and modifications in how you're parenting on a regular basis. That's not because you failed, it's because your child is learning and growing. 3, the only thing we can be in control of is our own actions. And that's a really important one for parents. Like, you can't make your child share, but you can change the context around your child to encourage sharing. And that's why having a range of strategies in your toolbox is so important, because when you're stuck, you have a few things to try. And then finally, to really let parents know, it is possible to simultaneously love and be intensely frustrated by your child. It's possible to have those two feelings at the same time. And that's when you know that you need a break. You're a human, and sometimes you need a break from the intensity of caregiving. So we're going to talk a little bit about limit setting and development, and then talk about a strategy for approaching limit setting. So my colleague Marielle is going to be dropping some PDF resources or sending that to you afterward. I'm not sure. We're going to figure that out, Mariel. Maybe you can let them know at the end. But I just wanted to, what I did was I took an assessment called the Transdisciplinary Play-Based Assessment, and I pulled out the emotional and social milestones from like 15 months to 4. And you're going to be shocked when you look at this list because so many of the typical milestones are what parents come in and tell you, oh, my kid has such challenging behavior. We have to remember that in the toddler years, the developmental job of a toddler is to individuate, become an independent person, and begin to explore the world on their own and test limits, senses of right and wrong, so that they begin to understand what the boundaries and ways of being in their culture are. That's their job. So it's important to remember that they have an intense and complex emotional life during this period. They're beginning to experience shame and pride for the first time. They're beginning to understand and express empathy for the first time. These are profound emotional shifts, kind of akin to the teen years. And we need to, even though they're very small humans, we need to really honor the emotional growth that's happening right now. We also have to recognize that wiring for self-regulation and self-control is slow and emerges over years. And so parents may feel that it's one step forward and one step back. That is very normal. The important thing for parents is to be consistent, loving, and clear about what those family rules and expectations are. Toddlers also have a hard time with generalization. Parents might come in and say, my child goes down for a nap with no problem at childcare, or my child cleans up at childcare, but then at home they won't do any cleanup. Guess what? Toddlers are not great at taking a skill from one place and moving it to another place. They need a lot of support around that. Also, routines at childcare are literally taught by their childcare providers. So these are learned routines that are taught intentionally over the first few weeks or months of care so children learn them. I don't know if you saw the Instagram post recently about a parent who posted about their 3-year-old, and they were like, yeah, on the weekend, we just started singing the cleanup song, like clean up, everybody clean up. And they were like, our kid was like a sleeper agent. She just started like walking around cleaning things up. And guess what? Like, it's a familiar routine. She had been taught that routine and now you're just using it, which is brilliant. But yes, these routines have to be taught so that they can be generalized. And then finally, your child, your toddler wants to be loved by you, wants to be nurtured, wants you to think that they're great and special. They desire to be in relationship with you. So let's get in the mindset and the body set of a toddler. So every day, there's someone that comes into your room and picks out what you wear. They tell you what activity you have to do next. Even if you were having a really fun time, it doesn't matter because now it's time to do something else. They decide when your activities start and end, like they decide, well, lunchtime's over now, so, take a last bite. They decide what you'll eat, even if you don't really want to eat it. They decide when you wash and what you wash. Like, you have to wash your hands after you go to the bathroom, even if you don't really want to. You have to wash your hair, even though the water gets in your eyes. They decide when you go to sleep and where you sleep. And they decide who you socialize with. I'm actually pretty certain you all can relate to this because you were all medical students. And I think this pretty much is the life of a medical student. But it's also the life of a toddler. So we all can have some empathy because all of these things are in direct contradiction to what a toddler's developmental job is, which is to individuate, be independent, make their own choices, feel like a competent individual person, right? So you can see the tension here that's set up in the parent-child relationship. And yet children need limits because limits are the guardrails that help children feel safe and secure. Limits give children a sense of safety and confidence and the notion that there is a safe place to return to so they feel comfortable doing those things that are developmentally necessary, going out to explore, trying new things, taking safe risks. That sense of limits that parents are going to keep them within a safe range of behavior is what gives children the confidence to go forward. And I know that all of you are probably very busy right now, but if you ever have a little bit of free time, there's an amazing parent education training called Circle of Security. And they talk about this parent as the bigger, stronger, wiser, and kind adult. Imagine a child who lives with a bigger, stronger, wiser, and kind adult. They feel nurtured. They feel cared for. They feel like they will be kept safe. They feel they can trust. So that is a really important image to hold in your mind, that being able to set limits is a gift to your child because it gives them the foundation from which they can grow. But let's talk about when we're out of balance, okay? So authoritative parents take a stance that's kind of harsh, right? They're too big and too strong. And permissive parents are too kind. They don't feel comfortable setting limits. They can't tolerate the discomfort of watching their child's distress with limits. And there's lots of reasons for families being out of balance. Some parents who experienced harshness either become too permissive, or on the other hand, they unconsciously or consciously replicate the parenting that they experienced. Families under a lot of stress may become more authoritative. Families who interpret gentle parenting to the extreme. So an example would be a father, actually my friend, a colleague of mine, Claire Lerner, and she has an Instagram page called Lerner Child Development, awesome page about limit setting. But she gave the example recently about a parent who had a toddler who loved drawing and they would draw before bed. And of course, at some point, the child was like, I don't want to stop drawing. I don't want to go to bed. I don't want to stop drawing. And the dad really struggled because he felt that putting limits on drawing time would limit her creative freedom. Now, no, but that's the short answer. The long answer is here's a dad who just, had a good goal in mind, but the larger picture is children need sleep to grow, to learn, to kind of firm up and strengthen those brain connections. And they need sleep to be better artists in the morning, right? And so setting limits on drawing time is not going to impact creative freedom, but clearly the distress around that was really hard for dad to manage. So that kind of permissiveness is not great in the long run because the child isn't getting what she needs and probably the parents aren't getting what they need. So let's see what this looks like in practice. Actually, did we? Yeah. So let's see what this looks like in practice. So we have a child who found their older child's soccer ball in the closet and they're throwing it all over the house. And so we say, hey, the ball is too big to throw in the house. Try this foam ball instead. And the child immediately takes the soccer ball and says, no, my ball, and just runs away. And so let's think about the child and the context here. The child is 22 months old. We know that they're in a stage where they like to do everything by myself. We know they want to be like their big sibling. And we know they're highly active. We also know the context is that this game was really fun. And it's also been raining. And so he had no outdoor time at childcare today. So if we think about how these parenting styles actualize, the authoritative parent might grab the child, swat their behind and say, I said no throwing and I meant it. The permissive parent just sets the limit repeatedly, like, hey, no throwing. Oh, gentle, gentle with the ball. But doesn't interrupt the behavior or actually manage the limit and a lamp gets broken. So the big question is, how do we get back into balance? And we need to help parents manage their own distress, because I think a lot of times why parents avoid limit setting is because they don't want to have to manage the distress that comes with the limit. And we have to kind of recognize that a child will never thank you for setting a limit. No teenager has ever said, "Hey, thanks for setting my midnight curfew. I feel so much safer now." No toddler will ever say, "Thank you for, putting me to bed at 8 o'clock. I love leaving you guys when things just seem like they're getting good." Right? Nobody's ever going to thank you for limit setting. But we need to have the tools to deal with our own regulation so that we can set limits that help our children learn the rules and how to cope with limits in ways that make them successful adults. So the other thing to remember is that learning limits is a skill, right? And when we have a child who doesn't know how to swim, we don't say to them, like, "What do you mean you don't know how to swim? Like, do you see the other children swimming? Go sit in timeout. You don't know how to swim? Sit in timeout until you're ready to swim," right? Like, when a child doesn't have the skill of swimming, we teach them. But when a child doesn't have the skill of sharing or turn taking, we often give them a punitive or harsh, disciplinary response. So we need to remember that children aren't born programmed with these skills. They learn them over time through hundreds of repetitions. We teach them ultimately. We also need to remember challenging behavior is often, not always, but most of the time, some form of communication. So challenging behavior can be used to request. They can be requesting an activity, a person, help, attention, or information. A child, for example, may pull at your stethoscope, if you have one around your neck still, may pull at your stethoscope. And, the parent might, see that as challenging behavior, but really what they're requesting is to explore this interesting object or perhaps to get your attention. We also see challenging behavior as a protest or an escape, to escape demands on them, to escape an activity they don't like. Like, for example, my friend's daughter, when she saw it was time for shots, literally ran out of the well child room, through the waiting room, and out to the parking lot. So very fast child. She later ran track, but don't worry, she's 20 and fully vaccinated now. But you can also want to escape a person, like, I don't want to kiss Grammy, so I'm going to kick and run away. Or escape sensory input, like, I don't like the seams on my socks, so I'm going to keep pulling them off or kicking my feet. And then we always, I've heard from a lot of folks that, like, parents seem very scripted now dealing with challenging behavior, and that they are just using so much language to overlay challenging behavior. And we have to remember that when we are at the peak of our emotional intensity, adults can't process or reflect either. So, just think about the angriest you've been recently. And if a friend came up to you and was like, "It looks like you're very angry right now. How are you feeling? What words would you use to describe what you're feeling right now? Do you want a hug? Do you want a teddy bear? Do you want, like, a glass of bourbon? Like, what would you like right now? What would help you cope with these big feelings?" Like, you can't answer that question when you're up here. So the best time to respond is to help parents recognize, what are the clues that your child is escalating? What are the situations where they are most likely to escalate? Is it going to the grocery store after childcare? That's great that you recognize that. What can we do about that routine to make it easier so that you can stay on the lower half of the curve? At the top of the curve, children cannot reflect, they can't ask questions, they can't make sense of what they're feeling. And on the lower side of the curve, they're sad and recovering. So the best time to intervene, if possible, is during the escalation phase. And then this is one approach to limit setting among many. We call it CALMR, and it really just gives you some big steps to think about as you're setting a limit. So first, we have to remember this limit, I'm going to stay calm because I know the limit that I'm setting is age appropriate and okay. And I know that I can handle my child's big feelings. So I say, it's time to go. Now you're going to hop in the car seat. And my child at the park doesn't want to. They sit on the floor, on the ground on the parking lot and lose it. And so we can acknowledge the child's feelings. You love the park. It's sad to leave. And then we lead the child to the preferred behavior. And there's some strategies we can use here. We can try an if then. If we buckle up now, then we'll have time for a story before dinner. Or we can try humor. We can, take the buckle of the car seat like a puppet. Oh, the car seat buckle is missing you. Dylan, come snuggle with me in the car seat. Or we can try a choice or a distraction. Do you want me to jump you into your car seat like a kangaroo? Or do you want me to fly you into your car seat like a bird, right? So we have some ways we can lead the child. A lot of children are going to be like, I'm not buying what you're selling, my friend. And they're just going to escalate. And so this is where our ability to tolerate distress really comes in because we know our limit is appropriate. We know we have to make dinner and we know the car seat is non-negotiable. So we manage the limit calmly, not angrily, calmly, because we don't want them to catch our dysregulation. Okay, it's time to buckle up. Your body is having a hard time cooperating, so I'm going to help you be safe. And then you pick the child up, hold them out of kicking range, ignore the screaming, the crying. And then once they're buckled up, we reconnect. So, maybe they're not ready to reconnect right away, but we can say, hey, kiddo, how you doing, sweetie? What music would you like to listen to? Do you want to listen to Miss Rachel or some of mommy's music? Right? So we reconnect. We just say, you know what? That was not a big deal. Mommy can manage it and it's over now. Another example with the ball, that ball is too big to play in the house. You can use the foam ball instead. I get it. That ball was super fun. We can play with it tomorrow when the rain stops. You can use this foam ball instead. And then we distract. I'm going to throw the foam ball and see if I can get it in the laundry basket. Do you think mommy can get it in the basket? Can you get it in the basket? And if we still have to manage the limit, I see your body is having trouble, following the rule. I am going to put the big ball in the closet. And then we can reconnect later. When the child has calmed down a little bit, we can say, hey, do you want to play with the foam ball or do you want to come help mommy make the salad? Right? Again, this is not a big deal. This is not the end of the world. I'm a grown up. I'm a big person. I can hold your big feelings and I still love you. That's what the message we want to convey. Whew. So we've been in together for about 35 minutes, and I just gave you like a quick introduction to why challenging behavior happens, how millennials approach and think about challenging behavior or parenting in general, and then we closed out with an approach to setting limits.